I drove over 2 hours to reach my lake house, the only place that still felt like peace after my wife passed. But the moment I stepped onto the porch, I froze. My son, Ethan, lounged in my chair, his wife and her parents beside him, sipping wine like they owned the place. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not allowed here anymore. This is their house now." I smiled, but in my mind, I'd already decided they would never forget this day. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. It was a slow smile. The kind people mistake for compliance. My fingers tightened around the handle of my weekend bag until I felt the veins in my wrist push against the skin. The late afternoon light bled gold across the water, the same water Caroline and I used to sit beside, counting the ripples until the sun went down. But that memory dissolved under the weight of what I was seeing. Ethan leaned back, one ankle resting over his knee, a gesture so casual it almost looked staged. Madison sat close to him, her hair arranged just so, holding her wine glass like it was an accessory. Her parents, Gerald, with his perfectly combed silver hair, and Patricia with that polite but superior half-smile, looked right at home. Too right at home. Gerald gave me the kind of nod you'd give to a handyman you'd hired for the afternoon. "Excuse me." My voice was calm, almost flat. That's how I've always sounded when I'm deciding which part of me to show someone. The one that negotiates or the one that dismantles. "You heard me, Dad," Ethan said, not a hint of hesitation. "We're here for the weekend. And by we, I mean Madison's parents too. They're going to start making themselves comfortable. This is theirs now." I glanced past him into the living room. The throw blanket Caroline had knitted draped over the arm of the couch, the same couch we'd picked out together. There was a stack of coasters on the coffee table, the cedar ones I made in my workshop the summer before she passed. Patricia's glass sat directly on the wood. "Since when," I asked slowly, "does something I own become someone else's without me knowing?" Madison set her glass down. "Since we decided it makes more sense this way. They need a place, Richard. You hardly come here. It's selfish to let it sit empty." Empty. That word hung in the air. I'd been here last month, sanding the porch railing. The month before that, I'd replaced the screen door, but none of that mattered to them. It wasn't about us. It was about control. Gerald spoke up for the first time, his voice oiled with false courtesy. "We're grateful for your generosity, Richard. We'll take good care of it." I didn't answer him. My eyes stayed on Ethan. "And you thought you'd just announce this while sitting in my chair?" Ethan's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. Better to be direct. There was a time, not so long ago, when a look from me could make him shift in his seat, rethink his tone. But now he didn't flinch. Somewhere between his college graduation and this porch, he decided he was the one giving orders. I stepped up onto the porch. No one moved to make room. "I drove 2 hours to be here," I said, my voice still steady. "I'd like to come inside." "Not today," Ethan replied. "We've got dinner plans. You'd be in the way." In the way. I looked at each of them in turn. Patricia crossed her legs, adjusting her shawl like she was settling in for a performance. Madison glanced at Ethan, a faint smirk playing at her lips. Gerald poured himself more wine. "All right," I said finally, the word tasting like metal. "Enjoy your evening." I turned, walked back down the steps, and crossed the gravel drive to my car. The sound of their voices, Ethan's laugh, Patricia asking about the wine vintage, followed me until I shut the door. The engine started on the first turn, German precision humming under the hood. I reversed slowly, eyes catching one last glimpse of them on the porch. Ethan didn't watch me go. He was already back in conversation, already erasing me from the scene. The road away from Clearview Lake runs through a stretch of pine that always smells like rain, even on dry days. Caroline loved that smell. We used to drive this road with the windows down, her hair whipping across her face as she laughed at something on the radio. I gripped the wheel tighter. My son had just told me I wasn't allowed at the one place that still felt like her. And the worst part wasn't the audacity. It was how easy it seemed for him. No hesitation, no flicker of guilt. By the time I reached the highway, the sun was gone and the air had cooled. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I didn't check it. Not yet. I wanted silence. When I pulled into my driveway in Phoenix, the dashboard clock read 9:14 p.m. The house was dark except for the porch light I always left on out of habit. Caroline had insisted on that. A home should never greet you in darkness, she used to say. Inside, I set my bag down in the hall and stood there, keys still in hand. The quiet felt different tonight, not peaceful, empty. In the kitchen, I made coffee. I didn't need it, just something to do. I took it to my study, sat in the leather chair that had molded to my shape over the years, and stared at the framed photo of Caroline on the bookshelf. It was taken right there at the lake house, a summer evening, the sun behind her turning her hair into copper. I thought about what she would have said if she'd been on that porch with me today. Caroline didn't raise her voice often, but when she did, the air changed. She wouldn't have let Ethan get halfway through that sentence. The phone buzzed again. This time, I picked it up. A text from Ethan. Just so you know, we've decided the lake house will be theirs permanently. Don't come back. No explanation, no discussion, just a line in the sand drawn over something he didn't own. I read it twice, set the phone face down, and stared at the dark window. For 3 years since Caroline passed, I'd been the accommodating father, saying yes to every request, writing checks without question, showing up when asked, and disappearing when not. I told myself it was for the sake of staying close to my only child. That maybe if I gave enough, we'd hold on to some version of the family Caroline cherished. But families don't take what's yours and tell you you're not welcome. Families don't erase your name from the door of your own home. I took a slow sip of coffee. Somewhere beneath the sting of humiliation, something steadier began to take shape. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. I'd been in construction my whole life. I know about foundations, how to build them, and how to undermine them without the structure even realizing it's failing. And I realized, sitting there in the dim light of my study, that my son had just given me a deadline without meaning to. They were there now. They'd stay as long as they thought they could get away with it. I glanced at the photo of Caroline again. She was smiling in that way that always looked like she knew something I didn't. You'd want me to handle this my way? I said quietly. Outside, the street was silent. Inside, I set the coffee cup down, reached for a notepad, and wrote a single line. They will never forget this day. It wasn't a vow made in heat. It was a blueprint. And in my world, blueprints always get built. The phone rang just after 6 p.m. the next evening. I was in the kitchen, standing over the sink, rinsing a plate from the simple dinner I'd made. My hands were wet when I picked up, so I balanced the phone on my shoulder. Dad. Ethan's voice was clipped, businesslike. The kind of tone you use when you've already decided how a conversation will end. Ethan, I kept mine flat, unreadable. Listen carefully. Madison and I talked it over. The lake house is going to belong to her parents now. Gerald and Patricia will be moving in permanently. My hand froze under the stream of water. Come again. You heard me. His words were as steady as if he were telling me the weather forecast. It makes more sense this way. They need a proper place, and you barely use it. I turned off the tap. The kitchen fell silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. You don't own the lake house, Ethan. You can't give it away. I can when it's the right thing to do. I laughed once, a short dry sound. The right thing? For who? For all of us, he said without missing a beat. They've been struggling. You have more space than you need. You're, older now, alone. It's not like you're taking friends up there every weekend. Older now, alone. He let those words hang, confident they'd do their work. 3 years ago, after Caroline passed, that line would have broken me in half. I'd have stumbled over my voice, offering concessions just to keep the peace, to keep him close. Back then, I thought losing my son's approval would mean losing Caroline all over again. But something about the way he said it this time, like my life had an expiration date that he'd already marked on a calendar, did the opposite. It hardened something inside me. Ethan, I said slowly, I worked 30 years for that property. I built the business that paid for every stone, every beam, every damn screw in that house, your mother and I. That's what fathers do, he interrupted. Provide. Make sure their family is taken care of. I provided for you, not for your in-laws. They're family now. No, I said, my voice sharpening. They're Madison's family. I barely know them. Silence crackled over the line for a moment. Dad, you're being selfish. I laughed, a low, disbelieving sound. Selfish? You've got nerve. I'll give you that. I'm serious. We've done a lot for you since Mom died. My knuckles whitened around the phone. Everything you've done for me? You mean the wedding I paid for, the car I bought you when yours broke down, the college loans I covered, or maybe the deposit for that overpriced apartment? That's just what fathers do, he repeated, like it was a mantra. And what sons don't do is steal from their fathers. His voice sharpened. You hardly go there anymore. What's the point of it sitting empty? It's not empty. I'm there when I want to be there. You're clinging to a house, Dad. It's unhealthy. Mom wouldn't. The air in the room shifted. Do not, I said, each word distinct. Speak for your mother. Another pause. Longer this time. You can't say no to me on this, he said finally, as if it were a fact. Yes, I can. You think you can stop this? We're moving them in next weekend. It's happening. No, I said again, calm and final. His voice climbed toward anger. Don't do this, Dad. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You'll just embarrass yourself. For years, I'd avoided embarrassing myself in front of Ethan. I'd kept my voice level, kept my demands minimal, kept my wallet open. But there was a strange freedom in that moment, realizing that the embarrassment was already his, not mine. I'm done talking about this, I said. You're not in charge here, he shot back. Not anymore. If you fight this, you'll lose. We'll take it anyway. There was a time I would have tried to reason with him, find a middle ground. But I'd spent my life in construction negotiations, and I knew when the other side had no intention of finding one. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tell him he was wrong. I didn't even ask him to reconsider. I just hung up. For the first time in our lives, I ended the call first. The phone sat on the counter, screen dark, my reflection faint in the glass. My heart was steady, my breathing even. It was such a small thing, that click, that deliberate end, but it felt like the opening move in a game I'd been avoiding for years. I rinsed the soap from my hands, dried them on a towel, and stood for a moment in the kitchen doorway. The quiet of the house pressed in around me, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt charged. Because now I knew two things. 1. Ethan had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. 2. I was finally willing to do something about it. I didn't sleep that night. I went through the motions. Shower, brush teeth, even flipped through the sports section of the Sunday paper. But when I lay down at 11, my mind wouldn't stay still. The ceiling above me might as well have been a whiteboard. Monday, April 14th, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Saturday, April 19th dates lined themselves up in my head like milestones on a project schedule. 30 years in construction had trained me to think in timelines, break the job into phases, know your deadlines, and most importantly, figure out the other guys. And Ethan had just given me one. They're moving in next weekend, he'd said, like it was already decided. Like all I had to do was get out of the way. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't some vague plan. This was a fixed target. And a fixed target could be hit from a lot of angles. I turned onto my side, stared at the space Caroline used to sleep in. She'd hated deadlines, but she'd loved preparation. Measure twice, cut once, she used to say when we worked on house projects together. My thoughts started assembling themselves into something more structured. This wasn't just about keeping the lake house. It was about showing Ethan, Madison, and her well-mannered, opportunistic parents that I wasn't a man you could maneuver like a piece of furniture. For the first 3 years after Caroline's death, I'd been exactly that. Moved wherever they wanted me, agreed to whatever they asked, convinced myself that saying yes was the only way to keep family from slipping away entirely. The pattern was embarrassingly clear now. 8 months after the funeral, Ethan called about his car. "It's on its last legs, Dad. Madison needs something reliable to get to work." That turned into $26,000 for a new SUV, purchased and delivered within a week. A year later, it was their condo. "The landlord's selling, Dad. We have to move fast on this place." I wrote a check for the deposit without even seeing the building. Then came the small loan to help them furnish it, which turned out to be 5 figures. Every time, I told myself Caroline would have wanted me to help. Every time, the thank yous got shorter, the requests larger. And now, here we were. By midnight, I stopped trying to sleep. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, made coffee black, strong, and sat at the table with a legal pad. At the top, I wrote one word in block letters: options. Under it, legal defense. Marcus Lee. Lock and key changes. Might escalate too fast. Surveillance/monitoring. Psychological deterrent. Public embarrassment, risky. I stared at the list. Legal defense was obvious. I'd known Marcus for 20 years. He'd negotiated my biggest commercial contracts, kept my company out of 3 frivolous lawsuits, and once talked a city zoning board into reversing the system, reversing a decision that would have cost me $500,000. Lock and key changes felt premature. If Ethan thought I was panicking, he'd double down. No, I needed him to think I was passive. Surveillance. Now that had possibilities. Not just to watch them, but to control the environment. Psychological deterrent. That one made me smile for the first time in days. I'd used it in business before. Subtle pressure that made the other party walk away thinking it was their idea. I looked at the word again, options. Then I drew a line through it and wrote advantages. Because that's what this came down to. Rule 1. Never negotiate from desperation. Rule 2. Control the information. Rule 3. Own the timing. I could almost hear Caroline's voice. "You're building something again, aren't you?" By 2 a.m., I had the skeleton of a plan. Phase 1. Talk to Marcus, get the legal walls up before Ethan even smells concrete. Phase 2. Install a system at Clearview that would make life uncomfortable for anyone who didn't belong there. Phase 3. Let Ethan walk right into it, and all of it timed for the one advantage he'd handed me on a silver platter: the weekend deadline. At 6:45, the sun was just starting to push light through the blinds. I showered, shaved, and put on the same navy sport coat I wore for client meetings back in the day. Not because Marcus would care, but because I did. You dress for the work you're about to do. By 8:30, I was in Marcus Lee's downtown office. He stood when I walked in, his handshake as firm as I remembered. "Richard, good to see you." "Wish I could say the same," I said, settling into the leather chair opposite his desk. "I've got a family situation. Property dispute." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Commercial or residential?" "Residential. Clearview Lake Villa." "That's in your name." "It is. Bought it outright 12 years ago." He leaned back. "Who's making the claim?" "My son." Marcus didn't flinch, but his pen paused over the legal pad. "Family disputes get messy." "I don't want messy. I want airtight." We went through the basics: title deed, purchase history, my will. Marcus outlined protections. Review the deed, reinforce ownership with a trust if necessary, create a clear record of any threats or coercion. "How fast can we move?" I asked. "For a basic review, a few days. More advanced protections, 2 to 3 weeks. "Too long," I said. "They're planning to move in next weekend." He nodded slowly. "Then we start immediately." Bring me every piece of paperwork you have on that property by tomorrow morning. And Richard, document everything, texts, calls, even in-person conversations. If they threaten or demand anything, write it down with the date and time. I left his office with the kind of focus I hadn't felt in years. Outside, the sky over Phoenix was a hard, clear blue. Halfway to my car, my phone buzzed. Ethan. Against my better judgment, I answered. Finally, he said. We need to settle this nonsense. Madison's parents are expecting to move in next weekend. Don't be difficult. I unlocked my car door and slid in. The only nonsense is you thinking you can give away my property. It's not nonsense, Dad. They've already started packing. That's unfortunate for them. They'll have to unpack. You're going to make this ugly. You've already made it ugly. He sighed, like I was a stubborn client refusing a good offer. Gerald lost his job last month. Patricia's on disability. They need this house more than you do. That's not my problem to solve. It's called family spirit. Like the spirit you showed when you told me to leave my porch. Silence, then colder. They're still coming Saturday. With or without your blessing. He hung up. I sat there in the driver's seat, staring through the windshield. Saturday. That gave me 5 days. 5 days to turn my lake house into a place they'd never want to set foot in again. Tuesday morning brought the kind of light that seems to flatten everything it touches. No shadows, no warmth, just a sterile clarity. I was at my desk before 7, papers spread in neat stacks. The villa's deed, tax records, insurance documents. Marcus would get them today. But my mind wasn't only on legal armor. Airtight paperwork was necessary, but it wasn't enough. Ethan had made one thing clear. He didn't fear consequences he couldn't see. He thought this would be a matter of stubbornness versus inevitability. That if he pushed long enough, I'd fold the way I always had. That meant I had to change the terrain. I sipped my coffee, staring at the photograph of Caroline on the corner of my desk. She'd been laughing when I took it, a strand of hair caught in the breeze off Clearview Lake. The photo had always been a comfort. Lately, it had become something else, a reminder of what was worth defending. By 8, I was on the sidewalk, walking 3 houses down to a narrow ranch-style home with a white mailbox that read Miles. Darren Miles was 52, a bachelor, and the kind of neighbor who could wire a home theater in the time it took most people to read the instructions. We'd met the winter after Caroline died when a burst pipe in his basement had him ankle-deep in freezing water. I'd called in a plumber I trusted, made sure the job was done right, and refused payment. Darren never forgot it. He opened the door in jeans and a faded t-shirt with some startup's logo on it. Glasses smudged from hours of screen time. "Richard," he said, stepping back to let me in. "Everything all right?" "Depends on how you define all right." His office looked like the inside of a server rack. 3 monitors, cables looped like vines, shelves stacked with routers, circuit boards, and gadgets I couldn't name. He gestured toward a chair, and "Saturday, I need your help with a project." His eyes narrowed slightly, the way they do when he's trying to decide whether someone's serious. "What kind of project?" "The kind that involves motion sensors, lights, sound, maybe some visual effects, and it has to be triggered automatically when people enter a space." Darren leaned back, the hint of a smile on his face. "Like a haunted house." "Something like that. Except the goal isn't fun. It's to make people leave and not want to come back." That got a low chuckle from him. "Now you've got my attention. Who are we trying to scare off?" I shook my head. "Better you don't know all the details. Let's just say some people think they can move into a place they don't own. I want them to have a memorable experience." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I can do memorable." We spent the next hour talking through possibilities. Motion detectors in every main room programmed to trigger lighting sequences that would be disorienting but not dangerous. Speakers hidden in vents and behind furniture, ready to play sounds, footsteps in empty hallways, doors creaking, whispers just below the level of comprehension, projectors to cast shadowy figures on the walls, and most importantly, a central control system I could operate remotely. "Can we add water activation?" I asked. "Shower, sinks, all on at once." Darren grinned. "Sure. I'll need to tie into the plumbing controls, but it's doable. And it's legal, all standard smart home functions, just creatively combined." By 10, his SUV was half loaded with gear. A stack of sensors no bigger than smoke alarms, rolls of programmable LED light strips, half a dozen compact projectors, and a tablet loaded with control software. He moved with the speed of a man who'd been waiting for an excuse to use all his toys at once. The drive to Clearview Lake took just under 2 hours. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind kept playing through the layout of the villa. Entryway, living room, kitchen, the 3 upstairs bedrooms, Caroline's sewing room that I hadn't touched since she died. Every room would have its part in the performance. When we pulled up, Darren stepped out and whistled low. "Nice place," he said. "It's mine," I replied evenly. "And I intend to keep it." Inside, the air was still faintly scented with the cedar cleaner I'd used on the floors last month. It felt wrong to be there without Caroline, but today the wrongness was edged with purpose. We started in the entryway. Darren mounted the first motion detector above the door, syncing it to the tablet. "When this trips," he explained, "the living room lights will start strobing and alternating colors, and the voice assistant will give a warning." "What kind of warning?" He typed something into the tablet. A moment later, a calm but firm voice filled the room. "Attention, you are not the owner of this property. Leave immediately." I felt something almost like satisfaction. Good. From there, we moved room to room. Upstairs, Darren positioned projectors to throw tall, shifting shadows against the walls, figures that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. In the kitchen, he rigged the faucets to open on command, water gushing with a mechanical roar. Speakers went into corners, tucked behind bookshelves, under chairs. The sounds they would carry, random creaks, muffled footsteps, indistinct whispers, would layer over one another until you couldn't tell what was real. "This all runs on a closed network," Darren said as he tucked cables behind a baseboard. "It's independent of the main Wi-Fi, so they can't just pull a plug or change a password." "Backup power?" I asked. He grinned. "Already covered. Hidden batteries in the basement will keep it going for days, even if they shut off the breaker." By mid-afternoon, the villa had been transformed, though to the casual eye, nothing looked different. That was the beauty of it. A living room still looked like a living room, but it was now a trigger point for light and sound. A hallway seemed quiet until you stepped into it, and the shadows began to move. We tested each sequence. The strobe lights hit hard, pulsing in a rhythm that made it impossible to focus. The voice assistant escalated its warnings if motion continued. The water systems roared to life after 30 seconds of movement. The whispers, barely audible at first, grew more insistent the longer you stayed. "This will work," Darren said, watching the tablet as sensors lit up in sequence. "It has to." As we packed up, I stood in the entryway, looking out toward the lake. The sun was sinking behind the trees, throwing a copper glow across the water. Caroline had loved this hour, saying it made everything look like it was holding its breath. I closed the door, locked it, and set the system to standby. In my mind, I could already see it. Ethan unlocking the door with that borrowed confidence, Madison trailing behind with her parents, all of them stepping into a house they thought was theirs. And the house answering them back. The game was about to change. Wednesday morning, Darren's knock came earlier than expected. I opened the door to find him balancing a stack of equipment cases against one hip, a compact projector tucked under his arm like a football. "I couldn't stop thinking about it," he said as he stepped inside. "Got a few ideas to make this even better." The kind of few ideas that Darren brought were never small. By the time we loaded his SUV, I'd counted 2 industrial-grade backup batteries, an array of new speakers no bigger than shot glasses, and something he called directional audio modules. Think of it like a flashlight for sound, he explained as we drove toward Clearview Lake. You point it at one spot, and only the person standing there hears it. No one else in the room will notice. I pictured Ethan standing in the hallway, hearing a voice whispered directly into his ear while Madison and her parents looked around, confused. Perfect. The villa looked exactly as we'd left it 2 days before. That was the beauty of Darren's work, everything hidden in plain sight, waiting. We started with the projectors. He mounted one high in the corner of the upstairs landing, its lens aimed to throw a shadow down the length of the hall. When he switched it on, a faint, elongated figure appeared, moving with the gentle sway of someone pacing. Even knowing it was just light on a wall, I felt my instincts tighten. Imagine seeing that at 2 in the morning after a glass or two of wine, Darren said. We added 2 more in the guest rooms, programmed to flicker every few minutes, just enough to catch the edge of someone's vision. Then came the directional audio. Darren installed one in the entryway, hidden behind the crown molding. We tested it. I stood on the welcome mat and a low voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Step to the left and it vanished. Step back and it returned. The effect was instant and personal, as if the house itself had chosen me. "That one's going to get inside their heads," Darren said. By mid-morning, the upstairs and main floor were fully integrated. Lights still strobed on motion, water still roared from every faucet after 30 seconds of activity. But now the system had layers, shadows to see, voices to hear, and the unease of never knowing what would trigger next. We moved to the basement for the battery install. Darren slid one unit behind the paneling near the breaker box, the other beneath the stairwell. "These will keep the whole system running for at least a week if they somehow cut the main," he said. "And good luck finding them without tearing the place apart." I stood at the top of the stairs, looking down into the dim basement. Caroline had always hated that space, saying it felt like the kind of place where bad news waited. Today, it felt like the nerve center of something surgical. By noon, we were ready for full sequence testing. We started in the entryway. Motion sensor triggered. Lights flared in jagged rhythm, and the voice assistant announced its warning. Darren moved deeper into the living room. Water erupted in the kitchen sink. Shadows flickered against the far wall, and the whisper followed him like a second shadow. Upstairs, the landing projector sent its pacing figure across the wall, while the bedroom speakers played a slow, irregular knocking, not loud, just there. The kind of sound you'd swear was real until you opened the door and found nothing. The timing was flawless. Each element built on the last, and every piece reset after a few minutes of stillness, ready to trigger again. "This," Darren said, grinning as we stood in the now quiet villa, "is a masterpiece." "It's a tool," I corrected, though a part of me agreed. We sat on the porch steps, eating sandwiches I'd packed from home, the lake stretching out in front of us. The water was calm, the air cool. The villa looked like the place it had always been for me, a retreat, a safe place. No one looking at it from the outside would guess that it was wired to defend itself. Darren wiped his hands and glanced at me. "You know, Richard, there's something satisfying about giving a house teeth." I thought of Caroline, of the years she'd insisted the villa be a place of welcome. She wouldn't have liked the idea of teeth, but she would have understood the principle, protecting what's yours. By late afternoon, we had everything stowed, the system armed, and the control tablet paired to my phone. I could now monitor the villa from anywhere, watch live feeds, activate or pause sequences, even adjust the timing on the fly. Standing in the doorway before we left, I took one last look around. The furniture sat exactly where it always had, the rug straight, the curtains drawn just so. Nothing to suggest that every corner, every threshold, every quiet space was now a tripwire. Back in Phoenix that evening, I sat in my study, the tablet on the desk beside me. The lake house's camera feeds glowed in the dim light: entryway, living room, kitchen, hallway, upstairs landing. All still, all waiting. My phone buzzed. At 8:47 p.m., a message from Ethan. We'll be there around 2 p.m. Saturday. Don't bother coming up. I stared at the screen for a moment, the corners of my mouth lifting. Exact timing. He'd just given me the last piece I needed. 2 o'clock Saturday. They'd arrive confident, entitled, certain I was nowhere near, and the house, my house, would be ready to greet them. I closed the message without replying, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence settle around me. In construction, the most dangerous moment is the one before the first hammer strike. All the force is still potential. All the change still invisible. Saturday, the strike would land. Saturday, April 19th, 1:45 p.m., the camera feed from the entryway was quiet, the lake behind it like a pane of blue glass. I sat in my study 200 miles away, the control tablet angled toward me, my phone beside it. Every system in the villa was armed, sensors primed, audio cued, projections loaded, water controls ready. At exactly 2:02, a dark silver SUV appeared on the driveway camera. Ethan drove. Madison sat in the passenger seat, sunglasses pushed up into her hair. Gerald and Patricia filled the back seat, leaning forward like tourists eager for the first sight of a landmark. They didn't pause to take in the view. As soon as the SUV stopped, doors opened and bodies spilled out, the rhythm of people who already believed they belonged. Ethan walked around to the rear, popped the hatch, and began unloading bags. Madison directed from the side, pointing toward the porch like she was calling shots on a movie set. Gerald lifted a rolling suitcase. Patricia cradled a large canvas tote against her side, the kind of bag people bring when they intend to stay a while. Through the camera's microphone, I could hear the gravel crunch under their shoes. A gull cried somewhere over the water. And then, as they reached the foot of the steps, Gerald noticed the sign. Darren's Work, a brushed steel plate mounted on a cedar backing, the message etched in bold black letters. Welcome to the house of the future. Enter at your own risk. Patricia stopped first, one hand tightening on her tote. What's this supposed to mean? Gerald leaned in to read. Some kind of joke. Madison laughed lightly. Oh, that's just Dad being weird. He's always doing stuff like this. Ignore it. Ethan didn't even look at the sign. Come on, let's get inside. But Patricia wasn't having it. I'm not walking past this thing. It looks ridiculous. It makes the place feel wrong. She reached up, gripped the mounting bracket, and yanked. The screws tore free from the siding with a sharp metallic squeal. The sign clattered onto the porch. She nudged it aside with her foot. There, she said, brushing off her hands. First thing to go. I watched the steel plate settle on the plank, sunlight glinting off its edge. They climbed the steps, Ethan in front, Madison right behind him. Gerald followed with his suitcase, Patricia trailing, still wearing the small, satisfied smile of someone who believes she's already improved her surroundings. Ethan pulled a key from his pocket. My key, copied from the spare I'd given him years ago, and slid it into the lock. The door opened without resistance. Welcome home, he said over his shoulder and led them inside. From my desk, I switched the tablet view to the living room feed. They came into frame one by one, their shoes crossing the rug Caroline and I had picked out on a trip to Santa Fe. Patricia's voice carried clearly through the microphone. Oh, it's even nicer than I imagined. Gerald set his suitcase down by the stairs. Feels like a proper home. Madison drifted toward the kitchen. Let's figure out dinner. I'm starving. Ethan stood in the center of the living room, hands on his hips, surveying the space like a man inspecting a property he'd just bought. There was an ease in his posture I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, and back then, it came from knowing his parents would handle whatever he broke. I let them move freely for the next hour. Gerald explored upstairs. Patricia rearranged the couch cushions. Madison poured herself a glass of wine from the bottle she'd pulled from her bag. Ethan fiddled with the thermostat. Every so often, one of them would pass a motion sensor. The tablet would light up, noting the activation, but I didn't trigger anything. Not yet. Let them get comfortable. By 8:30 that evening, the sun had gone down over Clearview. The upstairs landing camera showed Gerald in pajama pants, heading toward the guest room. Patricia was already in bed, a paperback open in her hands. Madison was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes. Ethan sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through something with the faint, self-satisfied smirk of a man who thought the day had gone exactly his way. I waited until the villa's sound profile, a graph on the tablet showing ambient noise, had dropped to near silence. 10:03 p.m. From my chair in Phoenix, I leaned forward, tapped the icon on the tablet's main control screen. Execute full sequence. The system came alive in less than a second. Lights in every room began strobing, not the gentle pulse of a club, but sharp, disorienting flashes in alternating red, blue, and white. Upstairs, projectors threw the pacing shadow across the hallway wall. Downstairs, speakers whispered just above the edge of hearing, "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here." In the kitchen, water gushed from the faucet, splattering against the stainless steel sink. The bathroom showers roared to life. Steam already clouded the upstairs landing. The landing camera caught Gerald stumbling into the hall, one hand shielding his eyes from the flashes. Pat, what the hell is going on?" Patricia's voice floated from the guest room, high and sharp. "Gerald, there's someone in here." Madison appeared in the living room feed, head whipping from side to side as shadows slid along the walls. "Ethan, did you set something up?" Ethan bolted upright. "No, it's probably some power surge." He cut himself off as the voice assistant overrode every other sound. "Attention. Unauthorized occupants detected. Leave the premises immediately." The directional audio in the entryway kicked in. Ethan froze mid-step as the whisper hit his right ear alone. "Get out." He spun around, looking for the source, but Madison and her parents were already moving toward the kitchen, trying to shut off the water. The kitchen camera showed Madison twisting the faucet handles, but the water kept flowing. Gerald yanked at the fridge door, like maybe that would help. Patricia clutched the doorway, wide-eyed, watching a shadow slide across the ceiling. Upstairs, the projector in the guest room flickered to life, casting the silhouette of a figure leaning in the doorway. Patricia's scream cut through the villa's noise. "Ethan," she shouted. "Call the police." He was already fumbling for his phone. But even if he managed to get through, I knew exactly what they'd find. A perfectly functioning smart home system. Nothing illegal, nothing broken, just an unfortunate malfunction. The landing feed showed Gerald grabbing Patricia's arm. "We're leaving now." Madison's voice overlapped his. "I can't get the front door open." 30-second delay on the smart lock to make them feel the walls closing in. I watched Ethan pull at the handle, his shoulders bunching with effort. When the lock finally clicked, they all spilled out onto the porch, blinking against the dark. No one looked back at the sign Patricia had torn down. They were in the SUV and reversing down the driveway in under a minute. The camera feed followed their tail lights until they were swallowed by the trees. The villa went quiet again. I sat back in my chair, hands resting lightly on the arms. The sequence had run perfectly. Not a flaw, not a single chance for them to reclaim the narrative. Ethan thought he'd arrived at his new property. Instead, he just walked into mine. The villa camera feeds were still open on my desk when the phone rang at 7:31 a.m. Sunday morning. The display lit with Ethan's name. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Morning, son." My voice was warm enough to sound believable, neutral enough to reveal nothing. "What did you do, Dad?" The words came out sharp, brittle, the sound of someone who hadn't slept and was running on adrenaline and indignation. "What do you mean? Don't play dumb with me." His voice cracked, too high for control. "The house went crazy last night. Lights flashing, water pouring out everywhere. Voices screaming at us to leave. Madison's parents are traumatized. My mom," he caught himself, rephrased. "Patricia was crying for hours. Gerald thought he saw. He broke off again, like the memory itself was something dangerous to admit out loud. I shifted in my chair, glancing at the still image on the monitor, the empty living room of Clearview Lake Villa, morning light spilling across the rug. That sounds terrifying, I said, letting just enough sympathy soften the words. Did you call anyone? We called the police, he said, bitterness pouring through every syllable. They came out at 6, searched the whole house, said they didn't see anything wrong. Well, I said lightly, that's a relief. Relief. The volume in his voice spiked. We didn't sleep for 8 hours. Carl collapsed twice. It's Gerald, I corrected absently. I don't care what his name is right now. I let a moment of silence fill the line before speaking. Ethan, sometimes these modern smart systems get unpredictable. Could have been a power surge. Could have been a wiring fault. Don't you dare patronize me, he snapped. This wasn't random. It was deliberate. And we both know you had something to do with it. I smiled at the monitor, though he couldn't see me. Ethan, I was in Phoenix all night, 200 miles away. How could I possibly control a house from here? You could have hired someone. Who exactly? To what? Set up an elaborate haunted house to scare you. That sounds a bit far-fetched, don't you think? His breathing was ragged through the phone. This isn't over. You hear me? We're not letting some technical malfunction stop us. They're still moving in. I tilted my head toward the camera feed. The villa was still empty, waiting. Maybe the house doesn't like strangers, I said. The silence that followed stretched for 10 long seconds. I underestimated you, Ethan said finally, his voice lower now, edged with something that wasn't quite fear, but close. That's been known to happen. The line went dead. I set the phone down gently, fingers tapping once on the desk. If last night had been a performance, then this morning was the review. They'd been rattled. The cracks in their certainty had appeared. But the show wasn't over, and like any good production, the second act had to raise the stakes. By 10 o'clock, the villa's entryway camera lit up again. A white sedan pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out, carrying a heavy black toolbox, the kind locksmiths use. I leaned forward, adjusting the angle for a better view. Ethan was with him, gesturing toward the front door with exaggerated frustration. The locksmith bent to examine the lock, then looked back at Ethan, shaking his head. The audio feed caught the exchange. These aren't regular locks, sir, the locksmith said. They're integrated smart systems, biometric scanners, wireless connectivity, backup power supplies. Can't you just replace them? Ethan asked. Not without reprogramming the entire network. And that's not my area. The man closed his toolbox with a decisive snap. You'll need a tech specialist for that. Someone who understands home automation. I allowed myself a small, private smile. Darren Miles was the only such specialist within 200 miles who had intimate knowledge of this system, and I was the only person he'd take instructions from. The locksmith left. Ethan stood on the porch for a long moment, hands on his hips, before turning and trudging back to his car. The villa's lock stayed engaged. The cameras stayed live. That night, I left every feed open. The house sat in darkness, empty but alert. Monday passed without a call. Tuesday, 8:03 p.m., the crunch of tires on gravel filled the entryway mic. I glanced at the feed. Ethan and Madison this time, without her parents. They came to my front door in Phoenix, like people who'd exhausted their polite options. Madison stood a step behind Ethan, arms folded, jaw tight. Open up, Dad, Ethan called. I did. We need to talk, he said. By all means. I stepped back, letting them into the entryway. Madison's perfume hit me before her words did, sharp, citrusy, expensive. This game ends now, Ethan said. Either you stop whatever you're doing and give us the villa, or… He glanced at Madison. Or what? I asked. Madison's voice was low, controlled. Or you'll never see us again. No visits, no holidays, no future grandchildren. There was a time when that would have been a knife to the gut. Now it was just data. So that's a threat, I said evenly. It's reality, Ethan replied. You're old, Dad. You're alone. What do you need with a place like that? I looked from one to the other. Interesting perspective from people who tried to move into it without asking. Madison's eyes flashed. We thought you'd be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I said. I'm keeping what's mine. Ethan stepped closer. You think you're clever? We'll sue you. Harassment. Emotional distress. We'll tell everyone what you did. Based on what evidence? His jaw worked silently for a second. This isn't over. I leaned against the door frame, my voice calm. I think it is. They left without another word. I didn't watch them go. In my study, I sat at my desk and pulled out a notepad. The conversation had given me the last piece I needed. Tomorrow, I'd call Marcus and then a few others. Ethan thought the battle was about technology and intimidation. He was wrong. The endgame would be about paper. Legal, binding, and permanent. The house could scare them away, but I wanted them locked out for good. The morning after Ethan and Madison stormed out of my house, Phoenix was gray and windless. The kind of sky that makes you think the day is holding its breath. I poured one black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Sat at my desk with the cup in one hand and my phone in the other. My thumb hovered over one name in the contacts list. Marcus Hall. I'd known Marcus for 22 years. He wasn't just an attorney. He was the kind of man who knew the exact sound a statute book made when you shut it in someone's face. We'd met back when my late wife Claire and I bought our first rental property. He'd handled the paperwork then, and he'd handled every real estate transaction since. When he picked up, his voice was the same as always, calm, clipped, efficient. Richard, what can I do for you? I need to protect Clearview Lake Villa, I said, permanently. No disputes, no loopholes. No one, not my son, not his wife, not her family, can ever claim it as theirs. There was the faint scratch of a pen on paper at his end. All right. What's the situation? I gave him the condensed version. Ethan's declaration on the porch, Madison's thinly veiled threats, the Monroes sitting in my deck chairs, sipping my wine, the haunting that sent them running. When I finished, Marcus gave a low whistle. And I assume you don't want to sell the property outright. No, I said, but I don't want it in my name anymore either. Not if it means they'll keep circling. That leaves a couple of options, Marcus said. The cleanest. Transfer ownership into an irrevocable trust or directly donate it to an entity you control, or you could gift it to a charity. I leaned back in my chair. What's the fastest? The charity route? If you have one in mind, I can have paperwork drawn up in 48 hours. Once it's signed and recorded, it's untouchable. I thought of Claire's voice, warm and steady, talking about the local Veterans Recovery Center she used to volunteer at. Clearview wasn't just a property. It was a place she'd believed could heal people. Maybe it still could. Veterans Rest Initiative, I said. They've been trying to buy land near the lake for years. Give it to them. Marcus didn't miss a beat. Understood. You'll still be able to visit, of course. I'll add a clause granting you honorary lifetime access, but legally, it won't be yours, which means it won't be his. Perfect, I said. We arranged to meet that afternoon. By 2 o'clock, I was sitting in Marcus's wood-paneled office, the kind of place where even the air seemed to carry legal weight. The windows overlooked downtown, but the blinds were half closed against the light. Marcus slid a neat stack of documents across the desk. Here's the deed transfer. Here's the gift agreement with Veterans Rest. And here, he tapped the last page, is the clause you asked for. Lifetime honorary access for you and anyone you name. Revocable only by you. I read every line, every clause, every comma. Then I signed. When the pen left the page, I felt something shift, like the weight of the villa had moved off my shoulders and onto a different foundation entirely, one Ethan couldn't touch. Marcus gathered the papers. I'll have this recorded with the county clerk first thing tomorrow. By Friday, it'll be a matter of public record. Anyone who searches the deed will see Veterans Rest Initiative listed as the owner. And Ethan? I asked. Marcus gave a small, dry smile. He can hire every lawyer in the state. It won't matter. The property will be beyond his reach. That evening, I sat in my study with the villa's camera feed open on my laptop. The place was quiet, washed in the gold of the setting sun. At 7:12 p.m., headlights swept across the driveway. Ethan's truck. Madison in the passenger seat. They got out fast, marching up to the front door like they owned it. Ethan tried his key. The lock stayed dead. He pounded on the door, called out once, not Dad, not Richard, just a harsh, open up. When no answer came, he stepped back and glared at the house like it had insulted him personally. Madison pulled out her phone and started recording a video. "This is harassment," she said to the camera. "This is an unlawful eviction. We'll see him in court." I almost laughed. She didn't know the ink on the transfer was already dry. The next morning, the call came. Ethan's number again. "This is it," he said without preamble. "We're taking legal action." "Ethan," I said, keeping my tone steady, "by the time you file anything, you might want to check who owns the villa." "What are you talking about?" "It's not mine anymore," I said. "And it's not yours." Silence. "Then, what the hell did you do?" "I honored your mother's memory," I said. "Something you seem to have forgotten how to do." His voice rose. "You gave it away? To whom?" "You'll find out soon enough. It'll be public record by Friday." He was breathing hard into the phone. "You're going to regret this." "No," I said. "I'm going to sleep better than I have in years." The line went dead. 2 days later, the news broke faster than I expected. The Veterans Rest Initiative posted a photo on their social media, their director standing on the villa's porch, the lake glittering behind her. The caption read, "We are beyond grateful to accept the generous donation of Clearview Lake Villa from Mr. Richard Hale. This retreat will serve as a place of healing for veterans and their families for decades to come." The local paper picked it up. So did a couple of online outlets. By noon, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts, not from Ethan, but from people I hadn't heard from in years, all offering congratulations or curiosity. When Ethan finally did call, his voice was flat, almost stunned. "So that's it. You'd rather give it to strangers than your son." "I'd rather give it to people who will respect it," I said. "You've destroyed this family." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." There was nothing left for him to say after that. I closed the call, leaned back in my chair, and looked out at the Phoenix skyline. The villa was no longer mine, but it was safe, Claire's place, my place, now there for the veterans who'd use it for something good. And Ethan, he'd been locked out, not by a deadbolt or a haunted house trick, but by the kind of barrier no tantrum or lawyer could break: the law. The war wasn't about to escalate anymore. It was over, and I'd won. Thursday morning came in clean and bright, Phoenix sky like a cut piece of glass. I woke before the alarm, already dressed in my mind. Gray suit, white shirt, the tie Caroline always said made me look like I meant everything I said. On the kitchen counter, a folder waited. Certified copies of the recorded deed, transfer, the gift agreement to the Veterans Rest Initiative, the lifetime access clause with my name on it, my keys to a door Ethan would never open. At 9:55, I pushed open the glass door to Marcus Lee's office. The receptionist looked up, smiled, and said, "Mr. Hale, conference room B." "They're already here." "Already here?" Of course they were. The insecure come early. The uninvited come angry. Inside, the room smelled like lemon polish and paper. Marcus sat at the head, a neat stack of documents aligned precisely to the table's edge. Across from him, Ethan, jaw clenched. Madison, arms crossed, eyes rimmed in sleepless red. Gerald and Patricia Monroe, side by side on the bench against the wall, dressed as if they thought dignity could be ironed into fabric. "Good morning," I said. I took my seat next to Marcus and folded my hands. Ethan didn't bother with a greeting. We're here to resolve this now. Marcus lifted a palm. You're here to be informed. This isn't a negotiation. The word hit them like a door that didn't budge. Madison gave a small laugh that had no humor in it. We'll see about that. Marcus slid a single-page printout halfway across the table. The county recorder's index. You can start by seeing this. Clearview Lake Villa, recorded owner. Veterans Rest Initiative. As of yesterday at 10:03 a.m., the gift deed, compliance affidavit, and transfer tax documentation are complete and, in legal terms, irrevocable. Silence landed with weight. Ethan blinked first. Irrevocable? People reverse things all the time. Not this, Marcus said. Irrevocable means what you're hoping it doesn't. Madison leaned forward, manicured finger tapping the paper. You can't just give away generational property. He's my husband. We have a familial right. No, you don't, Marcus said evenly. Arizona is not a community property state for gifts post-retirement when the property stands solely titled, and the transfer meets charitable conveyance standard. Your familial right exists only in your language, not in our statutes. Gerald cleared his throat, trying to use the voice of reason. We're not looking for trouble. We simply need somewhere to live. We thought. You thought you could move into a house that wasn't yours? I said. And you told me to get off my porch to make it happen. Patricia leaned forward, both hands flat on the table, pearls trembling at her throat. After everything our daughter has done for your son, she stopped, perhaps realizing she was speaking into a room that didn't reward sentiment. Marcus lifted another document. There's also this, a notice of no trespass and cease harassment on behalf of Mr. Hale and the Veterans Rest Initiative. If any of you enter the premises at Clearview Lake without Mr. Hale's express written invitation as holder of lifetime access, you will be in criminal trespass. If you continue the calls, texts, or unlawful pressure, we will pursue remedies. Ethan scoffed. Lifetime access? So, he gave it away and kept it. He donated the property, Marcus said, and reserved a donor access privilege for personal use at the charity's discretion. That's perfectly lawful. He can stay there whenever the villa is not reserved for program use. You, however, have no right to set foot inside. Ethan's mouth opened and closed. So he wins, he said finally, bitterly. Is that the big performance? Drag us down here to watch him win. His eyes came to me. You'd rather give it to strangers than your son. I'd rather give it to people who understand what a home is, I said. It isn't leverage. It isn't a tribute. And it isn't a punishment tool for a grieving father. A thin thread of red climbed Madison's neck. This isn't over. We'll tell people what he did to us. We'll tell them about the... She stopped herself on the word house, as if the memory of that night could still reach her throat. Marcus didn't blink. Tell them anything you like. The public record will tell them something else. About a donor who gave a lakeside property to veterans for healing retreat. Journalists called this morning. You may have noticed the photos. Ethan shot a look at Madison. So, there it was. They'd seen the posts, the comments, the little blue hearts that never land on the people you want them to. Patricia's voice, small now, touched the air. We didn't mean harm. We thought it made sense. He's alone. He doesn't even use it. I looked at her without anger. I thought of Caroline, of the way she would straighten a place setting with 2 fingers, gentle and uncompromising at once. I use it, I said. I use it to remember my wife. I use it to sit with the water and my quiet. And if I didn't use it at all, it still would not make it yours. Marcus reached for the final set of papers and fanned them face up for their eyes. To avoid further confusion, here are certified copies of the gift deed and the donative intent letter. Here is the recorded notice of donor access for Mr. Hale. And here are letters addressed to each of you, memorializing today's warning. Ethan stared at the pages as if they were written in a language he didn't study. You planned this. Not at the start, I said. But the moment you told me I wasn't allowed at my own home, you taught me how this was going to end. He pushed back from the table so fast the chair legs screeched. You've destroyed our family. I'm enforcing a boundary, I said. Family survives boundaries. It dies in their absence. Gerald stood, two palms up in a gesture I once saw a foreman use to beg a storm for mercy. Can we at least discuss a transition time to arrange something else? Marcus slid a slim white envelope across the table to him. A check from Mr. Hale to Veterans Rest Initiative in your name, Gerald and Patricia, marked for relocation assistance vouchers. The charity will issue it back to you in service credits with their partner housing organization. It won't buy a lake view. It will buy time. Patricia looked at the envelope like it might bite. We don't want his charity. I met her eyes. You wanted my charity at the lake. Madison's voice tried to find its confident register and didn't quite get there. Are we done? We are, Marcus said. Unless you'd like a copy of the law that explains irrevocable one more time. Ethan flinched as if the word hit him between the eyes. Then he turned for the door, hand on the handle, and stopped. He didn't look back when he spoke. You know what the worst part is? I keep hearing Mom's voice telling me to be better than this. And I kept thinking that voice would get quieter if I pushed hard enough. He swallowed. It didn't. The door opened and shut. They went out in a line that wasn't a family anymore, just four people bound by a shared loss and a failed plan. When the room was empty, Marcus gathered the papers with the same neat precision he'd laid them out. You executed perfectly, he said. Paper walls, I answered. They look thin until you walk into one. He almost smiled. What will you do now? Drive, I said. There's a place I haven't visited properly in months. The road to Clearview ran the way it always had, through scrub, then pines, then that first flash of water that could still take the air out of my chest. I pulled into the gravel drive just as the afternoon light turned the lake into hammered copper. On the porch, a woman waited, hair pulled into a low knot, clipboard in hand. She stepped forward with a professional smile that carried something warmer under it. Mr. Hale, I'm Dana Ortiz, Program Director for Veterans Rest. We shook hands. I thought we'd keep the dedication small, she said. You'll have your time here, and when our clients come up, well, they'll have theirs. Inside, the house had the quiet of a place between seasons. No tech teeth anymore. The projector's gone. The speakers boxed and returned to Darren with a thank you and a bottle of bourbon he'd pretend he didn't earn. The air held only wood and soap and the last echo of a fight that would not be staged here again. Dana walked the rooms with me, listening as I told her where Caroline liked to read, where the morning light landed in winter, how the kitchen drawers stuck when the barometer fell. She took notes like a steward, not a guest. We'll bring a small group next month, she said softly. 5 couples to start, space to breathe, to stop bracing for phone calls. Good, I said. That's what this house does. We were standing at the window that looked out on the dock when the tires touched gravel outside. I didn't need a camera feed to know that sound. You expecting someone? Dana asked. No, I said, but I expected this. The knock came quick and hard enough to rattle the deadbolt. I opened the door only because I chose to, not because anyone on the other side had the right. Ethan stood on the porch alone, sunlight bleaching his face into something nearly young again. You drove fast, I said. He glanced past me, taking in the empty living room, the same room that had moved and whispered and sent him running. Is it true? He asked. About the veterans? It's true, I said. It's done. He looked down at his shoes, then up at me. I said awful things. You did, I agreed. He took a breath, like he wanted to apologize and couldn't organize the words. Madison, he stopped. We thought if we pushed hard enough, you'd become the man you were 3 years ago, I said. The one who mistook kindness for surrender. His eyes flicked. He took a half step back. Do you hate me? No, I said, but I stopped letting you make me small. He swallowed, nodded, and for a second, I saw the boy who used to drop a baseball in the driveway and look at me to say we'd find it together if it rolled under the car. "What happens now?" he asked. Behind me, Dana coughed softly, a reminder that this wasn't our house anymore. It was now a place with a mission bigger than both of us. "Now," I said, "you go home. You figure out what you want to be besides entitled. Then one day, if you can come into a room without looking for an angle, you call me. Until then," I gestured to the lake, "this place is busy." "Busy," he repeated, as if the word might make room in him somewhere. He looked past me once more, then shook his head at something in himself, turned, and walked back to his car. I watched the tail lights carry him away down the ribbon of road. Dana stood beside me, the comfortable silence of people who understand that victory doesn't always throw confetti. "You okay?" she asked. "Better than okay." I stepped onto the porch, let the air find me. "I'm done apologizing to people who want what's mine." She closed her clipboard. "There's one more thing," she said. "Our board approved a plaque for the entry, understated. Just a line, given in memory of Caroline Hale. May this house be a quiet kind of healing. Only if you approve it." I didn't answer at first. The lake moved like breath. The pines shifted and clicked. "She'd like that," I said. "Quiet kind of healing." Dana smiled. "Then we'll set it." She left me there, the board meeting of trees in session above my head. The water doing what water does, holding the light and letting it go. I walked down to the dock and sat with my shoes on the warm board. I thought about boundaries and paper walls and all the years I spent thinking love meant solving a grown man's empty spaces with a house key. The wind lifted and skimmed the water. There was no audience now. No need for a performance. Just a man who had given away a thing to keep the part of himself that built it. When the sun slid lower and the cold came up from the lake, I stood, turned back to the house, and caught something in the window, just the reflection of a man who looked a little older than 65 and a lot steadier than the man who once smiled while being erased. My phone buzzed when I reached the porch. A single text from Ethan. "I'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk like a son." I typed nothing back. Some messages are answered by the life you live, not the words you send. I opened the door with my key, stepped into a house that would never again be used as a tool against me, and closed it behind me with a sound that wasn't victory and wasn't finality. It was something better, irreversible. The first snow came earlier than the forecast promised. Phoenix had its calendar, mild days stretching well into December, but at Clearview Lake, the seasons didn't wait for city schedules. I'd driven up that morning with a thermos of coffee, a stack of old photographs, and no particular plan. The sky was the color of pewter, and the lake, for the first time since summer, had stopped pretending to be glass and started looking like steel. Dana had left a note on the kitchen counter. 5 couples arrived Friday. 2 are Gold Star families. 1 is a father and son, both veterans, trying to talk for the first time in years. She signed it with just a D and a looping underline, as if even her handwriting understood restraint. The silence in the villa was different now. Before, it had been defensive, like a house holding its breath to see who would claim it next. Now it was open, rooms breathing without suspicion. Even the pine floors, which used to groan at night, seemed to creak with a kind of acceptance. I poured coffee into a mug that didn't match the others. Caroline used to pick up mugs like they were souvenirs from places we hadn't visited. This one was chipped on the rim, the kind you keep not for its perfection, but for the way your hand remembers it. I walked down to the dock, the air sharpening with each step. The cold came up through the boards, not unpleasant, just honest. Across the lake, a line of smoke curled from a chimney, pale against the slope of snow-patched pines. I thought of Ethan, how he had stood here last time, searching my face for something he couldn't name. It had been 6 weeks since the meeting at Marcus's office. I hadn't heard from him beyond that single text. "I'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk like a son." I didn't expect an update. Readiness is like thaw, It comes when it comes, and no amount of staring at ice will make it melt faster. Still, I'd kept my phone on during these trips, not because I was waiting, but because silence, too, can be a kind of conversation. The crunch of tires on gravel broke the quiet. I turned, half expecting Dana, but the truck was older, an early 2000s Ford, paint dulled by sun but still moving with purpose. It stopped halfway up the drive. The door opened and a man stepped out. It wasn't Ethan. The man was taller, broader in the shoulders, with the weary posture of someone unused to walking onto another man's property without an invitation. He wore a plain brown jacket, frayed at the cuffs, and his hair was threaded with early gray. "You hail?" he called. "I am," I said, staying on the dock. "I'm Ray Torres. My unit served with a man named Daniel Price. Said this place was going to be for us, guys like us. You're the donor." I nodded. "You served with Price?" "2 tours. He told me about the lake when I ran into him at a VA event. Said it was the only place he'd been in years where he could breathe without feeling like the walls were closing in." Ray's voice wasn't sentimental. It was matter of fact, like he was reporting coordinates. "Thought I'd see it for myself before the others come." I gestured to the dock. "You're seeing it." He stepped onto the boards, his boots thudding softly. He didn't look at me right away, just stared at the water. "You ever notice how still water can mess with your head? Makes you think it's safe to walk on when it's not. Then, snap, you're under." "I've noticed," I said. He nodded. "Guess that's why this place works. You can stand here and know it's deep and still. You're okay." We stood without talking for a while. A pair of ducks cut a slow wake across the far side, heading toward the reeds. "You lost someone here?" Ray asked finally. "Not here," I said. "But this was hers. And after she was gone, people I thought were mine tried to make it theirs." He didn't ask for details. Combat men rarely do. "Well," he said, "now it's ours and we won't waste it." When he left, the gravel noise faded fast, like the lake had swallowed it. I went back inside, set the mug in the sink, and found myself looking at the front door longer than necessary. By late afternoon, snow had begun to drift. I lit the fireplace. Not for heat, but because winter light belongs to fire, the way summer light belongs to water. That was when the second set of tires rolled in. This time, I knew the sound before the engine cut. Ethan's newer SUV, idling just long enough for me to think he might leave before stepping out, but he didn't. He climbed the porch steps slowly, his hands in his coat pockets, his eyes on the grain of the wood like it might give him courage. "I brought coffee," he said, lifting a cardboard carrier with 2 cups. "Don't know if you still drink it this late." "Depends on the company," I said. We sat in the living room, the fire giving the air a low pulse. He didn't rush into an apology. That oddly felt like respect. "I've been thinking," he began, "about what you said, about boundaries, about family surviving them or dying without them." I waited. "I told Madison I needed space. She said space is just another word for leaving, so I guess I left. Been staying in a rental. Gave her the lake back in my head a dozen times. Still doesn't make it mine." He looked at the fire, like it might hand him the rest of his sentence. "I came today because I don't want to be the guy who only calls when he needs something. And I don't want you to think I'm here to undo what you did. I'm not." The fire popped, a small sound in a large pause. "I am sorry," he said, "for how I spoke to you. For thinking Mom's voice was supposed to fade. It's louder now, and I'm trying to listen." I didn't rush to answer. Apologies are like seeds. You don't tug them out of the ground to see if they're growing. Instead, I poured the coffee into 2 of Caroline's old mugs, set one in front of him. "If you want to come back here sometime when it's not full, talk to Dana. It's her schedule now." His brow lifted slightly at the formality, but he nodded. "Fair enough." We talked for another half hour, about work, about the rental's lousy water heater, about nothing that could be weaponized later. Then he stood at the door. "You look better than the last time I saw you." I am better, I said. He left without a handshake, without a promise to call, and that was fine. Some bridges don't need fanfare to stand. They just need to stop burning. The snow came harder that night, tapping against the windows like small reminders. I stayed another 2 days, long enough to see the first group of veterans arrive. Dana greeted them in the driveway, no speeches, just handshakes and a welcome that didn't need more words. From the dock, I watched them walk the perimeter, shoulders loosening, boots crunching on the thin crust of snow. One man stood at the water's edge for a long time, like Ray had. I didn't interrupt. Later, when the fire was lit and laughter started in the main room, low at first, then stronger, I realized something. The villa didn't belong to me anymore. Not in the way it once had, and that was the point. I locked up that night, knowing Ethan might come back one day, or he might not. Both outcomes could live in the same winter without tearing at each other. When I finally drove back to Phoenix, the lake receded in the rearview, silver under the morning sun. Some places you keep, some places you give away, and some places, if you're lucky, teach you the difference. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on your screen.